All right, we are wrapping up with our final chapter of the semester, chapter 14, which is the autonomic nervous system. And this is one of my favorite divisions of the nervous system and just overall parts of the body to talk about. It's really, really fascinating, I think. All right, so we're going to start with the divisions of the autonomic nervous system because, yes, we do further subdivide the nervous system. So we've got central and peripheral nervous systems, and then we further divide that into the somatic and autonomic nervous systems, and then the autonomic nervous system is further subdivided into a couple others that we'll get into here in just a little bit. So, our autonomic nervous system is going to control certain targets or effectors like cardiac muscle, so our heart, smooth muscle, like what's found in our blood vessels and digestive system, and glands, so enzymes, like digestive enzymes coming out of the pancreas, would fall under this category. This branch of the nervous system is associated with unconscious visceral sensations and involuntary motor responses. So one way of kind of separating this from the somatic division is autonomic means automatic. These are things that are happening without us having to consciously think about them. These are separate from the somatic reflexes that we talked about in the last video for the somatic system. These are things that are happening without us having to have any sort of conscious control over them in any way, shape, or form. We have two chains of lower motor neurons, a central preganglionic neuron that's located within the brainstem or spinal cord, and then a peripheral ganglionic neuron that is going to be located outside of the central nervous system altogether. So preganglionic fibers are going to be very small myelinated axons that are leaving the central nervous system through either a cranial or spinal nerve, and then they synapse with the ganglionic neurons that are found in the peripheral body. And those ganglionic neurons will have unmyelinated postganglionic axons that are going towards whatever our target is, so the effectors, whether that is an organ or a gland or smooth muscle or anything like that. So we have two subdivisions of the autonomic nervous system, or ANS. These are the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions. So our sympathetic division is responsible for what is typically referred to as the fight or flight response. This is our stress response, and it is far more involved than just fight or flight. I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about that when we get there. And then the parasympathetic division is responsible for what is typically referred to as our rest and digest response. So the parasympathetic division is going to bring us back to baseline after that stress response is activated, and it is also responsible for our normal day-to-day bodily functions and maintenance of homeostasis. So our sympathetic division with the neurons and ganglia are going to involve first those preganglionic neurons in the lateral horns of the thoracic and upper lumbar spinal cord, and then preganglionic neurons that can connect to the sympathetic chain ganglia. So we did cover the sympathetic chain and sympathetic ganglion in lab recently. These are also sometimes referred to as paravertebral ganglia because they're right outside of the vertebrae. And then there is also collateral or prevertebral ganglia located anterior to that vertebral column. So along that sympathetic chain, we have superior, middle, and inferior cervical ganglia, as well as the sacral ganglia. These are not directly connected into the spinal cord. So they are connected into different parts of the nervous system through other means. And then with the collateral ganglia, we have the celiac ganglia. So those are going to be very closely associated with organs like what we saw with the celiac trunk with blood vessels. So spleen, liver, stomach. stuff like that. And then we have the superior and inferior mesenteric ganglia going to the intestines and the different mesenteries around the intestines. As for the nerves, those preganglionic fibers will leave the spinal cord through the ventral roots, and then the spinal nerves and some white rami communicantes to reach those sympathetic chain ganglia and collateral ganglia. Since the sympathetic ganglia are very, very close to the vertebral column, those preganglionic fibers are very, very short. And then the ones that are going to go to other areas are going to have much longer fibers. So the preganglionic fibers coming from the lower region of the thoracic column, so from vertebrae number 5 in the thoracic region down to lumbar vertebrae 2, go through special nerves called the splanchnic nerves and terminate at the collateral ganglia. So these neurons are going to send those fibers to a target effector. So again, smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, stuff like that. And since the sympathetic ganglia are much closer to the vertebral column, those postganglionic fibers are very, very long. All right, so we can have those shorter ones and longer ones. So here is some sympathetic innervation. So our sympathetic nervous system. So again, sympathetic is fight or flight. This is our stress response. And that stress response can get activated in both times of physical stress, physical threats to us. If you come across a mountain lion while you're out hiking, this is going to get activated, but also gets activated when you're getting ready for a big anatomy exam, or you have a fight with a very close friend or a significant other or something like that. This can get activated during times of both physical and emotional stress. But as you can see, all of these nerves are coming out of the spinal cord largely. There are some coming out of the cervical region of the spinal cord and some parts of the brain. That's more for the parasympathetic division though. Most of these sympathetic ones are coming directly out of that spinal cord. And as you can see, they're going pretty much everywhere in the body. Eye, salivary glands, the heart, lungs, entire digestive system, urinary system, the reproductive systems, everything, all right? Because we have a lot of things that need to happen during that stress response. So these pathways, first are spinal nerve pathways. These synapses are going to end up happening in those ganglion and then carry information through those spinal nerves at that same level that they're at. So kind of going pretty much straight out. Postganglionic nerve pathways. The preganglionic axons will move upwards, so they will ascend to a more superior location or descend to a more inferior paravertebral ganglion or sympathetic ganglion. They'll form that synapse there and then carry information out through the sympathetic nerves. Our next nerve pathway, that splanchnic nerve pathway, these are preganglionic axons descending to a prevertebral or collateral ganglion where they will have that synapse and then carry information out through a specialized nerve there. And then we have the adrenal medulla pathway. So our adrenal gland is really, really important for our sympathetic nervous system. So this is an integration between the endocrine and nervous systems. So preganglionic axons will go directly into the adrenal medulla, which is part of our endocrine gland. We've talked about this with the endocrine system already. And this is also considered to be a modified sympathetic ganglion, interestingly. So we have specialized cells in the adrenal medulla called chromaffin cells. These are neurosecretory cells. So these are cells that are found within this endocrine organ that are going to release neurotransmitters, that are also hormones. These are epinephrine and norepinephrine, or adrenaline and noradrenaline, releasing them into the bloodstream. So here is our visual of these different sympathetic chain ganglia. So here's a central neuron synapse forming in that sympathetic chain ganglia, and then going out the white ramus communicantes or communicans to whatever the target is. Here is that next level. So we have our spinal nerve right here coming out. And then this is where we are moving that central neuron synapse either with a more superior or inferior ganglion. So this graphic is showing it synapsing with a superior ganglion in this particular case, but it could go further down also before going out to that target effector. And then our last example here is where we have that central neuron going through the white ramus, but does not synapse in that chain ganglia. It goes out to one of those collateral or prevertebral ganglia before going to those target effectors. All right, now let's talk a bit more about the parasympathetic division, their neurons and ganglia. So here we have preganglionic neurons located in the nuclei of the brainstem and the lateral horn of the spinal cord in the sacral region. All right. So these preganglionic neurons connect to terminal ganglia near the target organ or into intramural ganglia located inside of the target organ. So it can either go near that organ that we're targeting or into that organ we're targeting, depending on what effect we need to have and what nerves are involved. So the actual nerves themselves within our parasympathetic division, again, these start up in the brainstem and some areas of the spinal cord. So the nuclei in the brainstem, these are going to control facial organs that send their preganglionic fibers through the oculomotor nerves, facial nerve, and glossopharyngeal nerve into different areas. And so we have the ciliary ganglia that are going to be the eye movements. The facial nerve will go into the palatine and submandibular ganglia. So that is going to be more in, so submandibular, this is going to help with some of those salivary glands. And then the glossopharyngeal nerve is synapsing with the otic ganglia. So pharyngeal for pharynx, to give you an idea of what that's going to. The nuclei found in the brainstem that control thoracic and abdominal organs, heart, lungs, digestive system, urinary system, these are going to send those fibers through the vagus nerve, cranial nerve number 10, through terminal and intramural ganglia. All right, so this can go either near or into various organs. The vagus nerve is super important for our parasympathetic nervous system to function. And then the neurons of the lateral horns down in the sacral region of the spinal column are going to have axons with the pelvic nerves projecting into, again, either terminal or intramural ganglia of the abdominal and pelvic organs. So now we're getting more into some of the other urinary organs, as well as the lower portions of the intestines and reproductive organs. All right, so ganglionic neurons send the postganglionic fibers to a target effector, and since the parasympathetic ganglia tend to be much closer to the target effector organ, they tend to be very, very long, and then the postganglionic fibers tend to be very, very short. So here's parasympathetic innervation. So again, we've got a lot more cranial nerves coming out at various locations, and they're going to go to different areas. So we've got our eye, lacrimal gland, salivary glands, that vagus nerve, like I mentioned, goes to a lot of things. It is very important for that rest and digest response, maintenance of homeostasis, because as you can see, it is going to the heart, lungs, entire digestive system, including the liver and pancreas, which have other functions within the body as well. And it is additionally going to the urinary system, and reproductive system, along with those pelvic nerves. So the vagus nerve and these autonomic plexuses are crazy important for returning to baseline after a stress response and just overall maintenance of homeostasis in these various systems. All right, we're going to wrap up that introduction section here, and we will continue in the next video talking about the synapses and then different effects and reflexes of these various portions of the autonomic system.